Hey class, it's Ashley, and I'm back with another mentoring moment. And today I'm going to talk about why boredom is a big deal that can truly ruin your career. I think that a lot of people feel bored at work, right? Like you feel uninspired, like you're not really doing anything that feels really meaningful or impactful. But this job pays the bills and rent is still due on the 1st. And so you make it work. You figure it out. You put your head down, you do the work, and you try not to complain or to, belabor the fact that you're unhappy at work. But I'll be honest with you, like being bored at work is way more dangerous than you might realize. And boredom at work leads to a lot of bad behaviors that you absolutely want to avoid if you are trying to advance your career. And so if you feel bored at work, if you feel uninspired, if you feel uncommitted, if you don't feel like you're driving real impact, if you don't feel like you're making more money, if you don't feel like you're being intentional about your career, I absolutely want to put you on notice. I want to alarm you. I want to FYI you. I want to give you a PSA, sis, that boredom at work is a big deal and it can absolutely ruin your career. And so today I want to break down and honestly break apart the belief that boredom at work is not a big deal, that everybody's bored at work, that nobody's inspired, that nobody's doing any meaningful work. I want to break down and break apart that myth, that belief, and really talk to you about why it's so dangerous to be bored at work, why it can be so detrimental to your career, and what you can do about it, right? Like what you can do to interrupt the boredom in your career and actually be intentional and actionable about the next steps in your career. So if that sounds like a conversation you're excited to be a part of, if you too are bored at work and you know that, like I've been bored for weeks, months, years, I'm uninspired, I've mastered this job, I know how to do everything here, there's nothing left for me to do in this organization, there's nothing left for me to do in this job, it's time for me to move on. If you know that's true for you, then you are in the right place today in today's live, because we're going to talk about why boredom is a big deal and why not paying attention to being bored at work can ruin your career. Let's start with what boredom looks like in the workplace. So, what I've experienced, particularly with high achieving professional women, is that sometimes we don't really go after the roles that we should, right? Oftentimes we will, apply for roles just because we think we can get them. Maybe somebody recommended a job to us and put us on, so we just took it. Maybe we just went into the best next step, the best next role, right? Like we just kind of did the next thing and we weren't really intentional about our career. And so we find ourselves in jobs, in roles that even at the start, even when we started them, they were beneath our skill set, right? Like they were beneath our skill set when we started them months ago, years ago. And now, but we thought, I talked to a lot of women who were like, Ashley, I started this job right before the height of the pandemic, or, I started this job when I had got fired from a previous job. So you end up being in a situation where, you were maybe desperate at the time. And you're like, you know what? I just want to keep a job. I just want to hang on to something. My life feels like it's in flux. Like I want to be able to do the next best stable thing. Right. And so you do that, right? You hunker down. You do the thing that's stable. You do what you can, what you feel like is available to you, and you just hope that you survive, right? You hope that you can weather the storm. And I get that, right? Like I understand what it feels like to feel desperate at work and to feel unhappy at work and to feel like I just got to do anything to get out of here. And so then you go into anything. You go into a job where maybe you were overqualified, maybe you weren't being paid well, maybe it was just the best next step, but it really wasn't what you wanted to do. And now you find yourself in this role feeling very bored. And just throw some hearts up on the screen if you can relate. If you're like, yes, Ashley, I too have felt very bored in my career. I definitely feel like I'm not really being fulfilled. I'm not doing work that's meaningful. I'm not paid, well. And I'm just flat out, I'm bored. I'm over this. I've been doing this. I actually talked to a prospective mentee just the other day who was like, honestly, Ashley, at this point in my career, I feel like I need to move out of the way for somebody else, to advance their career. Like, I'm in a role right now where it's like, I have mastered this like months ago, years ago. At this point in my career, I actually need to move out of the way, out of this organization, so someone else can come in and actually do this work, because I'm over it. Like, I don't need to be here in this role anymore. I don't need to be doing this work anymore. And so when professional women have that experience, when they feel that way, what tends to happen is that, and sort of one of three things, I shared this in a post that I posted earlier on Instagram. I'm just going to pull it up so we can reflect on it together. One of the things that happens when you're bored at work is that, like, you start to have an inflated ego, right? And let me know if any of you have been there. Like, you're bored at work and you're basically like, I can do this with my eyes closed. And you're like, these people don't deserve me. And I'm just, checking boxes at work, check. Yeah, do this, do that. When you start to get bored at work, you often start to have an inflated ego. You start to be like, you know what? I'm over this. I'm over these people. I'm better than them. I'm better than this. I don't need these people. I can be doing anything. You start to like kind of feel yourself, right? And ego is actually not a bad thing. Shout out to Beyonce. She all told us she got a big ego and that we could have a big ego too, right? So ego at its heart is not a bad thing. However, an inflated ego, particularly when you're bored at work, can have you, kind of have you with an ego that's not pouring into you, that's not elevating you, but that's actually demeaning other people, right? So you're bored at work, you're uninspired, you're kind of over the job, you've mastered everything in the role, you already kind of know how to do everything, and now you're kind of like belittling the organization, belittling the unit, belittling your colleagues, belittling your supervisor, belittling the work. You're like, I'm above this, it's time for me to move on, like, I'm bored here. And that inflated ego is really dangerous, because when you have nothing left to learn in a role, when you have nothing left to give to a role, when you have no value left to give to a role, that's a really dangerous place to be. Because in your career, you should always be adding value. In your career, you should always be doing work that feels meaningful. In your work, you should always be driving impact. And if you're not doing that, your ego starts to rise, and then you're just like, I already know how to do everything here. I already know everybody. I already know the players. I know how this works. I don't need you people, right? And that's a really dangerous place to be. The belief that, the boredom isn't a big deal. Boredom is absolutely a big deal, because you start to get into your ego, and your ego can absolutely ruin your ability to build meaningful connections with your colleagues, your coworkers, your supervisors, and it can start to affect your work. Because the second thing that being bored at work leads to is poor performance. Because you already figure out, like, you know how to do everything, because you already feel like you got this in a bag, because you know everything and you know how to do every process and you know every person. Now you start to phone it in, right? Now you're like, you know what? I'm just going to turn this in. I know this is good enough. I give 110% here. So these people don't deserve my best. And, I'm just going to do whatever. You start not showing up to meetings. You start showing up late to meetings. You start phoning it in, right? And just throw some hearts up on the screen if you can relate. Like, you've been in a job where you're just like, you know what? I'm over this. This is beneath me. I don't even care anymore. I'm bored here. Like, this is like whatever. And it starts to affect your performance, right? And I've definitely had this happen with my mentees. Like, I can remember specifically, I had a mentee, Natasha, who was doing like really, meaningful work in public policy. And she had an annual review with her supervisor, and her supervisor flat out told her, you're phoning it in. I can see you're not giving us your best. I can see you're not really doing the work in a meaningful way. I can tell that you're bored, and I'm going to note those reflections on your annual review. And here she was like, I'm at the top of my game. I know what I'm doing. I got this, job in the bag. And meanwhile, her performance was slipping because she wasn't attuned to what was going on in the organization. And she just thought nobody would notice. But everybody noticed, right? Or her boss, specifically, her boss noticed and documented her on her annual review for her lack of engagement and lack of commitment to the work. So then she came to me and she's like, Ashley, I'm freaking out, because I'm like, am I about to lose my job? I really got a really bad review. And now I feel like my boss doesn't trust me. The team doesn't trust me. And Natasha and I actually worked together to help her transition to a new organization. And she was able to take on a higher level role and advance her 6-figure salary. She was already in the 6-figure club, and we were able to significantly grow her salary by helping her transition to a new organization. But I don't want you to wait until you're desperate, until you get a bad review because you're bored and you're phoning it in. I want you to be more attentive to your career and notice, you know what, I'm kind of bored here. You know what, like, I feel like I know everything about this job. You know what, like, I feel like I could be doing more. And I want you to work with me as a career coach so that we can find work that is inspiring, that is intentional, that does allow you to drive impact before the boredom starts to impact your performance. Right? Because once the boredom starts to impact your performance, now we're talking about a loss of a positive reference, right? If your boss recognizes that you're bored at work and you're phoning it in and you're barely, you're basically just waiting until they fire you. You're like, yeah, girl, I'm here. I'm just here so I don't get fined. I'm not really trying to be here. I don't want to do this work. I'm actually looking for another job. If that's you and your boss finds that out, right? Not that like I don't want to inspire fear, but I guess what I'm saying is if you start to show up at work like you're bored, like you're uninspired, like you're not committed to the work, and your boss, your supervisor gets wind of that, how are they going to be positioned to provide you with a positive reference when you phoned it in their organization, right? It's really critically important that you are intentional about building a career where you're driving impact, where you're interested in the work, where you're interested in the outcomes, because that means that your performance is going to rise and you're going to be working and doing and engaging in a way that's meaningful and feels impactful and feels inspired, and you're going to be producing great work. But if you're bored at work, you're not going to produce great work. And then when it's time for you to transition to a new organization, you've not been doing any work that's meaningful and you can't get a positive reference out of your employer because you've been doing boredom work for the past 18 months, right? So now it's critically time for you to, address your boredom, right? Address the fact that you're bored at work, address that, right? And you might be wondering how, Ashley, you're right. I am bored at work and I really hadn't thought it was a big deal. But now that you're talking about an inflated sense of ego and poor performance, I'm starting to realize me being bored at work is a bigger deal than I originally realized, right? And I'm seeing some hearts come up on the screen. So I think we're on the same page, right? This belief that boredom isn't a big deal we got to cut that out. If you're bored at work, if you're uninspired at work, if you're not doing anything that's meaningful, if you're not being paid well for your work, if you're not driving impact in your work, that is a problem. And what I don't want to see you do is wait till you get desperate. Wait till the boredom turns into resentment. Because it starts off as boredom. It starts off as uninspired. It starts off as just kind of a lack of interest. But it can quickly turn into resentment when you move from just being bored at work to also feeling like, you know what, I'm bored. I ain't even doing nothing that's meaningful. And they ain't even paying me enough to do the little stuff I am doing. Right? Now you're resentful. We've moved from boredom to resentment. And when you get resentful, then it's all downhill from there. You're angry at the employer. You're angry at your supervisor. You're angry at your coworkers. You're angry at yourself. Then you start to take that anger and frustration home. Now you're angry at your spouse. You're angry at your kids. You're angry at your best friend. You're angry at yourself. Now you're not sleeping. Now you're overeating. Now you decided I'm not going to go to the gym. Now you decided to go for the bag of hot Cheetos instead of the grapes. Right? Do you see the cycle that I'm going through here? And I want to tell you that I'm not trying to be dystopian. I'm not saying the world is going to blow up because you're bored at work. What I am saying is that it's a very slippery slope to resentment, anger, frustration, and that bleeding into your home life. And I know this because, one, it's happened to me, right? I've been angry at work. I've been frustrated at work. I've had challenges at work. And when I experience those challenges and I'm snapping on my partner at home, and then I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to Netflix and binge Netflix and chill for 5 hours when I was only going to watch an hour-long show, right? It starts to just a downward spiral. And I've seen it in the hundreds of women that I serve in mentorship, right? That they are, it starts off as boredom and then it turns into resentment and then it starts to affect their mental health and then they're angry and then they're frustrated and then they're desperate for something else, right? So before we get to desperate, boredom is right here and desperation is right here, right? I don't want to see you go on the slippery slope from boredom to desperation. I want you to address the problem at boredom. While right now it ain't that bad and you just bored and you know you could be doing more, now is the time to invest in yourself through expert level mentorship. before we get to desperation, I often say, listen, I'm here to serve you. And I can certainly serve you when you're desperate. Like when you're down and out in your career and you had lost the job and cussed them people out and walked out and quit and done the Viola Davis walk off, once you've done that, yes, I can still help you. But please, for the love of God, don't make my job hard. Let me help you before you get desperate. Right now, while you're just kind of bored, while it doesn't really feel inspiring, while you've been job searching by yourself, and maybe you had a couple interviews, but you didn't get an offer, you got an offer, but they kind of lowballed you, and you're still thinking, well, maybe I'll just keep trying by myself. Right there, that sis, that right there, that's the time I want to help you. Right there. Don't wait a moment longer. Let's stop delaying and let's take action now. Because boredom is a big deal. And it can absolutely ruin your career if you don't address it before it slips into desperation, right? The final thing I wanted to talk about related to this is a lack of demonstrated expertise. So one of the things that I've seen happen, and this typically happens with my mentees who have been in roles for 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, more than a decade, right? What starts to happen when they are bored at work is that they just start doing the bare minimum. They just start coasting. They've done the big lifts. Maybe they had some notoriety early in their career. People know them, people trust them. And so they just start going like this. Right? And this is a safe space. So if that's you in your career, just throw some hearts up on the screen. If you're like, yes, Ashley, that's been me. I'm just in this career like, not doing anything that feels particularly meaningful. Getting by on the salary that I'm in, but definitely wanting to make more money. Feeling kind of bored at work, not feeling inspired. If that is you, one of the things that I have seen happen for women like you is that you start to not really do anything that's meaningful at work, which means that even when you decide to invest in your career development, and I'm talking to you about the demonstrated expertise that you have, and I'm talking about how you've demonstrated your expertise and how you've done really meaningful work in the past, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, you don't have anything to show for it. Because you listen, I just been there. I just been phoning it in. I just been, doing whatever. You don't even have anything to speak to your expertise because you've not been doing anything meaningful in the job for years. You've not driven any innovation. You've not led any project teams. You've not done anything inspiring or meaningful or attractive to a future employer. So now when I'm trying to prep you to position yourself as a top candidate to new employers, you don't got nothing for me because you ain't been doing nothing meaningful in your career for years, for weeks, for months. You've been phoning it in. You've been checking boxes. You've been showing up bored, uninspired, and everybody can tell. So now when we're prepping you for an interview, girl, you don't got nothing to say. You don't got nothing to show. Right? And my approach in mentorship is to use what you already have, the skills, the knowledge, the expertise, the degrees, the credentials, whatever you already have, to package that and to position you to a higher level of leadership. But some of you make my job so much harder because you've been bored at work for weeks and months. And so you've not been doing anything intentional for weeks and months. And so when it comes time to position yourself as a top candidate for an interview, you don't got nothing to say. Well, in 2018, I had it's like, girl, you ain't been doing nothing in years. So please, for the love of God and all things holy, let's release the belief that boredom at work is not a big deal, right? Right? If you can believe that, if that resonates with you, if you now understand why boredom is a big deal, just type big deal in the comment section. Big deal, big deal, big deal. Just type big deal in the comment section if you're like, yes, Ashley, I get it. I see why boredom is a big deal. I understand that if I'm bored at work, that's a slippery slope to desperation. That's a slippery slope to poor performance. That's a slippery slope to no demonstrated expertise. That's a slippery slope to an inflated ego. And that's going to end me up in desperation. And I don't want that to happen to me. If you understand that boredom is a big deal, just type big deal in the comment section. I want to make sure what I'm sharing is resonating, what I'm sharing you're understanding, and that we will leave the belief that being bored at work is no big deal. We're leaving that belief today. What's today's date? February 17th. We're leaving that belief alone. We're releasing that belief, and we're going to pick up the belief that boredom is a big deal. And that if we stay stuck being bored in our career and not doing anything about it, it can really ruin us and ruin our career. So if you find yourself bored at work, What I want to do is have a conversation with you. I want to better understand why you're bored, how long you've been bored, what has caused you to be bored. And I want to talk to you about how we can work together to build a career development plan that can have you doing work where you're driving real impact and doing work for communities, customers, clients, students that you care about, right? Whoever whoever the stakeholder is on the other side, right? Because boredom is a big deal. And if we end up staying stuck in the boredom, it can really ruin our career. So instead of staying stuck in the boredom, instead of getting wrapped up in, well, this ain't a big deal, it's fine, I'll just figure it out, maybe next month, maybe next year. If you're bored, that's a red flag, right? Like, y'all remember, like, maybe it was a couple months ago or like maybe late last year, everybody's doing like the red flag memes on Twitter. Boredom is a red flag. And it's a slippery slope to the desperation in your career. So before you slide down the slippery slope, I want to help you really uncover where this boredom is coming from and develop a career development plan that's going to have you driving more impact and making more money in your career. Because I'll tell you that I think one of the reasons why women stay bored at work is because they're like, well, the money is good, and I don't want to rock the boat. But did you know that you can do work that's really meaningful and really impactful and do work that you love and be paid well for that work, right? Like, it's not either this or this. It's not like an exhilarating and exciting career and be paid pennies or be bored at work and be paid okay, right? Like both, you can have both. You can have you can have an exciting and exhilarating career and be paid well for your expertise. Both are available to you. Both are available to you. And so if you're bored at work and you're overcompensating because you think, oh, I can't be bored have a fulfilling career and be paid well, I'm here to break down that belief too, right? The belief that a good, safe job is just not going to be interesting and you're not going to be able to drive impact and you're not going to have transformational experiences with your customers or your clients or your students or whatever that is, whatever that belief that you're holding on to, I want you to release it today. February 17th, we're releasing it. No longer can we hold on to the idea that we can't have meaningful, fulfilling careers and be paid well. If you're bored at work, that's a red flag. And I want you to take that red flag and bring it to me in a conversation with me this week. So if you are a professional woman who works in corporate, nonprofit, and educational leadership, and you are looking to make a minimum of $25,000 more annually in the next 2 months, and to be able to drive impact in your career, to move away from boredom and actually drive impact in a career that you care about, I'm the right mentor for you. I invite you to apply to work with me today. You can do so right on my website at mentor-me.org. That's mentor-me.org. I'm accepting new mentees right now, and I'm so excited to serve you. Boredom does not have to befall you, right? You don't have to be bored. You don't have to put up with that. You can have a fulfilling and meaningful career, and we can build a roadmap for you to get there together. If that sounds like what you're looking for, I invite you to apply to work with me today. I am so excited to serve you.